And here's the original baker. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, chirped, pointing her smartphone camera right at my face for her vlog. I just kept my head down, wiping flour onto an apron I'd worn for 20 years. The Saturday morning rush at the Miller's Loaf was humming, but all I heard was her whisper to my son, Ben, a second later. Ben, seriously, can you ask her to move? Her old apron is so off-brand for the new direction. Off-brand. In the bakery I built with his father. I wasn't his mother or the founder. I was just in the way. That comment was the final straw. But to understand how we got to that breaking point, you need to see the bank letters that arrived last Tuesday. That Tuesday, the bank letters were splayed across the big farmhouse table where my husband Frank and I used to count the day's earnings, all quarters and dollar bills. Now it was just white envelopes with menacing red stamps. The bakery was silent. That's the first thing that hits you. It was 6 p.m., a time that used to be a warm chaos of me pulling the last rye loaves, the air thick with the smell of caraway and caramelized crust, kids coming in after school for a 50-cent cookie. Now, silence, and the smell of bleach. Chloe had insisted on sterilizing the aesthetic. She'd replaced our warm, butter-yellow walls with a flat, sterile white that belonged in a hospital. The old wooden shelves Frank had built were gone, replaced by cold, stainless steel racks that vibrated every time the door opened. She was at the table, tapping a single, blood-red fingernail on the laminate. Click, click, click. It was a sound that drilled right into my spine. My son, Ben, sat across from her, his head in his hands, his shoulders slumped. He had his father's build, but none of his backbone. I was at the back counter, by the old Hobart mixer, doing the only thing that still made sense. I opened the small, temperature-controlled cabinet, a repurposed wine fridge, actually, and pulled out the glass jar. Inside, it was alive. The mother. A bubbling beige-gray slurry that smelled of sharp vinegar, ripe bananas, and 40 years of history. I'd created it with Frank in our tiny apartment kitchen, feeding it with nothing but flour and water and patience, long before Ben was ever a thought. We called it Frankie, after him. It was the soul of everything we built. It's just not possible, Ben mumbled, his voice muffled by his hands. The numbers can't be that bad. The numbers don't lie, Ben, Chloe snapped, that sharp nasal voice of hers. She was all about the brand. She spent more time taking photos of bread than baking it. Revenue is down 40% since we implemented the new workflow. 40%. How am I supposed to build a lifestyle brand on that? I poured a little flour into the jar, my back to them. I didn't want to be in this. And the loan, Ben trailed off. The loan, Chloe said, standing up, was rejected. The franchise loan, the entire plan, Ben, gone. Why? I asked, my voice quiet. I didn't turn around. I just kept stirring the starter with my wooden spoon. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Why? Chloe let out a laugh that was just a puff of air. Because the bank said the core business is unstable. They said our projections were aspirational. Ben finally looked up, his eyes red. They said the business is failing, Mom. I stopped stirring. The little scrape-scrape sound was gone, and the silence was heavy again. I turned around, holding the spoon. Failing? Ben, we've had a line out the door every Saturday for 30 years. We've paid this building off. We paid for your college for... I looked at Chloe's left hand, at the 3-carat diamond, for everything. That was then. Ben slammed his palm on the table, and the envelopes jumped. That was before. No one wants this stuff anymore, Mom. Don't you get it? He stood up and walked over to the cooling racks. He grabbed one of the day's loaves, one I had baked, from the starter. A beautiful, dark-crusted sourdough with a perfect open crumb. This is the problem, he said, holding it up like it was a piece of garbage. It takes 18 hours to make one of these. 18 hours. Do you know what Panera's proofing time is? 2. We're getting killed by them, by Starbucks, by everyone because you're too slow. Slow. He called my life's work. Slow. He called his father's legacy. Slow. This bread, I said, my voice dangerously low. Put the shoes on your feet. This bread is the only reason you have a brand to photograph, Chloe. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Maggie," Chloe sighed, rolling her eyes as she scrolled through her phone. "It's just flour. We're trying to scale. You can't scale. That. It's artisanal, which is just another word for unprofitable." Ben threw the loaf down on the counter. "She's right, Mom. We're bleeding cash. We have to make a change. We bought a new system. It's arriving Thursday." "A new system?" "A high-speed proofer," Chloe said, not even looking up. "It uses commercial yeast injectors. We can cut the 1 8-hour ferment down to 90 minutes. We'll be able to pump out 500 units an hour. We'll get the costs down, get the volume up, and reapply for the loan in 6 months." I looked at the jar in my hands. The living mother that I had fed and cared for every single day, through blizzards, through Frank's sickness, through my own grief. They were going to kill it, to replace it with an injection. "What you're talking about," I said, setting the jar down gently, "isn't bread. It's just foam. It's air. It has no soul." "That's the point," Chloe finally snapped, looking up from her phone, her face a mask of rage. "Soul doesn't pay the mortgage, Maggie. Soul isn't scalable. I'm not going to end up as some small-town baker in a stupid apron like you. We are building an empire." I looked at Ben. This was his moment, his one chance to be his father's son, to choose. He just looked at the floor. He couldn't meet my eyes. "We're making the change, Mom," he whispered. "The truck comes on Thursday. The new proofer needs the space. Where that old cabinet is." He was telling me to get my starter out. "So you're just throwing it all away," I said. It wasn't a question. "No," Ben said, finally looking at me. And his eyes were cold. It wasn't my son anymore. It was her husband. "We're not throwing it away. We're upgrading. And we're doing it with or without you." He grabbed his jacket. Chloe, satisfied, put her phone in her purse. They walked to the door, the bell jangling as they left. I was left alone in the dark, sterile white bakery. The only warmth in the entire room was the glass jar I held in my hands. "Frankie," I whispered, the glass cold against my cheek. "They're trying to kill us." And in that cold, silent room, I knew I had to make a choice. They thought I was just an old woman in an apron. They thought I was slow. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I walked out of the sterile white bakery and up the narrow, creaking stairs to my apartment. The air changed with every step. The sharp smell of Chloe's bleach faded, replaced by the scent of my life. Old books, the dried lavender I kept in a bowl by the door, and the faint, sweet, background perfume of yeast that had seeped into the very plaster of the walls over 40 years. This apartment was my sanctuary. It was small, maybe 600 square feet, but it was mine. Unlike the cold, white showroom downstairs, this room was warm. It was filled with the things that mattered. My eyes drifted over the bookcase, crammed with paperback novels and worn-out cookbooks, their pages stained with vanilla and butter. My gaze fell on the armchair, the one with the worn-in seat, draped with an old Afghan my mother had knitted. And on the wall, the photos. They were a map of my life. Me and Frank, impossibly young, squinting in the sun on our wedding day. Frank holding a tiny, red-faced Ben, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Ben on his first day of school, his backpack almost as big as he was. Ben graduating from college, a business degree, paid for in full by 18-hour sourdough loaves. It was all there. The life I built. The family I raised. I sat in the armchair, the old springs groaning in protest. I didn't cry. The time for tears was long gone. Now, there was just a cold, clear, settled feeling. This wasn't about a new proofer. This wasn't about upgrading or scalability. This was an erasure. Chloe didn't just want to change the bread. She wanted to erase the past. She wanted to erase Frank. She wanted to erase me. She saw our history, our slow methods, as a weakness. She wanted Ben to have no loyalties, no history, no mother but her. She was convincing my son that his entire inheritance, the legacy his father and I had built with our bare, flour-dusted hands, was worthless. And my son, my weak-willed, terrified of his wife's son, was letting her do it. A cold anger, hard as a diamond, settled in my stomach. They thought I was just an old woman in an apron, a relic. They forgot who taught Frank how to balance a ledger. They forgot I was the one who developed every single recipe in that binder downstairs. Ben was just the kid we paid to sweep the floors. I would not be erased. I stood up. I walked to the cedar-lined closet, the one Frank built into the wall. I didn't pull out my big, worn-out suitcase. I pulled out a sleek, black, modern carry-on, the kind a businesswoman would use. The kind I bought myself last year, just in case. I was not being kicked out. I was leaving. I packed with a strange, methodical calm. My 2 best pairs of wool pants, the cashmere sweater I bought at a garage sale, my most comfortable walking shoes, the small, silver-framed photo of Frank from my nightstand. Then, I went to the kitchen. Not the bakery, but my own tiny kitchen. I opened my small, half-sized refrigerator. In the back, behind a carton of eggs, was a small, unmarked mason jar. Frank always used to say, "Never put all your eggs in one basket, Maggie, and you never leave the mother to someone who doesn't respect it." I had kept this small, personal portion of the starter up here for 5 years, ever since Ben had brought Chloe home for Thanksgiving, and I saw the way she looked at my worn furniture. I knew, even then, a woman who judges a chair by its upholstery will judge a life by its bank account. I held the small jar in my hands. It was cool to the touch. I swirled it, and the mother moved sluggishly, alive and patient. The smell of hay and canvas hit me, so real I almost turned around. I was 25 again. It was the first ever harvest festival in the town square. We had one card table with a red and white checkered cloth, a metal cash box, and 20 loaves of bread. We sold out in an hour. A man, the editor of the local paper, bought the last loaf. "I haven't tasted bread like this since my grandmother's kitchen in the old country," he said, his eyes wide. "What's your secret?" Frank, his face flushed with pride, his white apron already smudged with flour, beamed. He pulled me close with one big, dusty arm. "My secret is her," he said, his voice booming. "She's the one with the magic." He pointed to the starter jar on our table. "She made that from nothing. Just wild air, flour, and a whole lot of love. We call it the mother." I'd blushed. "Oh, Frank, stop it." He'd kissed the top of my head, right in front of everyone. "I'm not stopping. It's the mother of all our bread, Maggie. It's our future. It's you." The memory faded. I stood in my silent apartment holding the jar. "It's you." Ben's voice echoed in my head. "Your methods are too slow." Chloe's voice. "Soul isn't scalable." I looked at the bubbles rising, one by one, to the surface of the starter. Slow. They think slow is a weakness. They think soul is a liability. They're so young. They don't understand. In baking, and in life, slow is where the character develops. It's where the strength comes from. I opened a cabinet and pulled out a small insulated lunch bag. It was blue plaid, the kind you'd buy at Target for your kids' school lunch. I carefully nestled the jar inside, zipped it up, and placed the bag gently into my carry-on, on top of my sweaters. I zipped the suitcase. It was done. A strange, cold peace settled over me. This wasn't a defeat. It was a strategic retreat. They wanted the bakery. They could have the empty, sterile box. They could have the stainless steel shelves and the new high-speed proofer that made foam. I was taking the soul. I slid the zipped carry-on bag under my bed, into the darkness. I had taken the soul. And not a moment too soon. I heard the heavy, confident clomp, clomp, clomp of Chloe's expensive boots on the wooden stairs. She didn't knock. Why would she? She didn't see it as my home. She saw it as an unused storage room above her business. The door swung open, hitting the wall with a soft thud. There they were. Chloe stood in the entryway, her arms crossed, her leather jacket creaking. She was a whirlwind of sharp angles and expensive perfume, a scent that always smelled to me like burnt sugar and chemicals. My son, Ben, hovered behind her, a large shadow in her small eclipse. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the photo of his father on my bookcase. "Maggie," Chloe said. "No, Mom, just Maggie." It was a new thing, a power move. I didn't say anything. I just stood by my armchair, my hands folded, waiting. This was my 600 square feet of dignity, and I would not let her see me flinch. "So, Ben and I have been running the numbers on the apartment," she said, pacing into the room, running her finger along my bookshelf. All this, it's just not a sustainable part of the business model. This space is a line item, and it's bleeding us dry. We can't afford it." "You can't afford it," I said, my voice quiet. "This apartment, Chloe, is the business. It's paid for. It has been for 20 years. It's where your husband grew up." Chloe let out that little puff of air. "Don't be sentimental. It's not about what it was. It's about what it is. And right now, it's an unmonetized asset." She walked to my little kitchen table, the one where I'd helped Ben with his homework, the one where Frank and I had shared countless cups of coffee at 4 a.m. She tossed something onto its wooden surface. It was a brochure. It was thick, glossy paper, the expensive kind. On the front, a photo of two seniors, a man and a woman, their hair perfectly silver. They weren't a real couple. They were models. They were laughing, holding porcelain teacups, but their eyes were vacant. At the top, in a gentle flowing script, were the words, "Silver Pines, a new season of care." "Silver Pines," I read out loud. The name sounded cold. It sounded like a place you go to be forgotten. "We toured it last week," Chloe said, tapping the cover. "It's really state-of-the-art. They have water aerobics, a 24/7 nursing staff, ice cream socials." I looked at Ben. He was still staring at the photo of his father. "Ben," I said. My voice was sharp, and it finally made him look at me. His eyes were bloodshot and empty. "Ben," I said again, holding up the brochure. "What is this?" He swallowed. "Mom, it's..." "Chloe's right. The business. We're in trouble." "The loan." "So you're putting me in a home." "It's not a home," Chloe snapped. "God, don't be so dramatic. It's an assisted living facility. It's professional care. You can't just be up here all alone. What if you fell? It's an insurance liability. We can't be responsible for that." Responsible for me, after I had been responsible for him his entire life. I opened the brochure. My hands weren't even shaking. I felt a strange, icy calm. I looked at the photos of the rooms. They were tiny, all of them, the size of a college dorm. A small, single bed, a plastic-covered armchair, and a window that didn't look like it opened. "It says here," I said, reading from the page, "our residents enjoy 3 nutritious dietitian-approved meals a day." I looked up at Chloe. "I've been a professional baker for 40 years. I've fed this entire town, and you want me to go somewhere that serves dietitian-approved meals?" "You won't have to worry about cooking anymore," Chloe said, as if this was a gift. "You won't have to worry about anything. You can just rest. Play bingo." "I don't play bingo." "You'll learn," she said, her voice strained with fake brightness. I turned the page. "The floor plans. A companion suite. What does that mean?" "It means you share a room," Ben whispered, finally. It's the most affordable option, Mom." I closed the brochure. I placed it on the table, perfectly aligned with the edge. The clack of the glossy paper on the wood was the only sound. I looked at my son, the boy who, when he was 6, fell and broke his arm. He'd been so brave at the hospital, right up until they came to set it. He'd grabbed my hand and said, "Don't let them take me, Mommy. Don't let them." And I'd held him. I'd told the doctor, You wait until he's ready." Now, he was the one letting them take me. "You're throwing me out," I said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact. "You're kicking me out of my home, the home I built with your father, so you can monetize it, and you're putting me in a companion suite at Silver Pines." "It's for the best, Mom," Ben mumbled, looking at his feet. "This is what happens when you don't plan for your future, Maggie," Chloe said, her voice hard. "You become a burden on your children. We're just trying to make the best of a bad situation. We're trying to give you a safe place. A safe place. A prison." "That's where you're wrong, Chloe," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "I am not your burden. This is my home." "Not anymore," she said, her fake sympathy gone. "The new proofer gets here on Thursday. The installation guys need access to the utility lines up here. They need this whole room cleared out. You need to be gone by then." Thursday. That was 2 days. "We'll have a car come pick you up," she continued, turning for the door, "to take you to Silver Pines for your intake. Intake, like I was a package or an inmate." She and Ben walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the glossy brochure and the smell of her perfume. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the smiling, vacant-eyed models on the cover. They thought they were giving me a life sentence. I walked to my bed. I knelt, my knees cracking, and pulled out the black carry-on. I unzipped it. I took out the blue plaid lunch bag, opened it, and looked at the jar inside. "Frankie," I whispered to the living starter. They didn't just give me a deadline. I zipped the bag back up, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face. They just gave me a head start. They didn't give me a head start. They gave me a 2-day notice. Thursday morning, 9 a.m., the day the Silver Pines car was supposed to come, the day the new high-speed proofer was arriving, the building thrummed with a new, ugly energy. I didn't wait for them to knock. I zipped up my black carry-on. I picked up the blue plaid cooler bag, the one holding Frankie, my past and my future, and I walked to the door of my apartment. I opened it, and the smell hit me. It wasn't the warm, sweet, tangy scent of my life's work. It was plastic. The smell of new, shrink-wrapped machinery and ozone. Downstairs in my bakery, I could hear the hydraulic hiss of the new proofer being unboxed. I heard men shouting, their voices echoing in the sterile, white-walled space. I walked down those creaking stairs, one step at a time. My hand, wrinkled and flour-dusted for 40 years, slid along the wooden banister Frank had sanded smooth. I reached the bottom. The bakery was unrecognizable. My beautiful cast-iron oven was covered in a plastic tarp. The old wooden counter was gone, replaced by a sterile, stainless steel island. And there was Ben, my son. He wasn't in an apron. He was wearing a crisp, blue button-down shirt that Chloe had probably picked out. He was holding a clipboard, pointing, trying to look like he was in charge, but he just looked like a scared kid playing dress-up. Our eyes met. In that 1 second, I saw it all, the shame, the guilt, and the weakness. He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. He quickly broke eye contact, turning to one of the workmen, pretending to check something on his clipboard. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't face the woman who had raised him, as he stood by and let his wife throw me out. He didn't say, "Mom, wait." He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say a word. So, I didn't either. I kept walking. I pushed open the heavy front door, the bell, the one that had cheerfully announced every customer for decades, was gone. Chloe had it removed last week. Said it was tacky. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The morning air was cold. It bit at my cheeks. The town was just waking up. Cars rumbled by. I put my black carry-on down on the concrete. I placed the blue plaid cooler bag right next to it. And I stood there. A 60-year-old woman, with her life in 2 small bags, standing on the curb in front of the bakery she had built from nothing. Mrs. Gable, on her way to the post office, walked by. She'd bought a pumpernickel loaf from me every Friday for 25 years. She stopped, her face twisting in confusion. "Maggie? Goodness, are you going on a trip?" My throat felt thick. What could I say? "Yes, Carol," I forced out, trying to make my voice light. Something like that. She looked from me to the bakery door, where the installation guys were visible, then back to my suitcase. She knew. The shame was a physical, burning thing in my chest. Then, I heard a sound from above. A faint click. I looked up. The window to my apartment, my window was open, and Chloe was leaning out. She was holding her smartphone in both hands, pointing it directly at me. The little red light was on. She was filming. She was filming me. Her face was a perfect, calculated mask of sorrow. I could almost hear the voiceover she was composing in her head for her followers. Self-care means making hard choices. It's so important to set boundaries, even with family. Feeling so heartbroken today, but we know it's for the best. And then, I didn't have to imagine it. Her voice, clear and sickeningly sweet in the cold morning air, drifted down. She was narrating, her voice trembling with fake tears. Today we made the hardest, bravest choice. To give Ben's mom the safe and peaceful retirement she deserves. It's just so hard to let go, but we're doing this for her. My breath caught. This wasn't just an expulsion. This wasn't just betrayal. This was content. My humiliation was her next vlog post. My life being torn apart was just a storyline for her brand. I stared right up at her, right into the black, unblinking lens of that phone. She expected tears. She expected me to break down, to yell, to beg. It would have made a much better video. I gave her nothing. The shame that burned in my chest just moments before, it vanished. It was replaced by something else. something cold and hard and pure. It was rage, but it was a quiet rage, a patient rage. I saw her for exactly what she was, a parasite in a leather jacket, and I saw my son, a shadow, moving in the room behind her. He wouldn't come to the window, he wouldn't even look. He was a coward, hiding while his wife filmed his mother's eviction for social media clout. I held that stare. I let her film my cold, angry, resolved face. Film this, I thought. Put this on your little internet show. Show everyone exactly what you are. My hand tightened on the handle of the plaid cooler bag. The mother. They thought they were filming an ending. They thought they were getting rid of the off-brand old woman. I turned my back to the window. I faced the street. I didn't care about Mrs. Gable. I didn't care about the cold. I didn't care about the phone. I just waited. The car from Silver Pines was due at 9:15, but that wasn't the car I was waiting for. I just stood there, my back to the bakery, my back to the window where Chloe was still filming. I felt the cold concrete through the soles of my shoes. I watched Mrs. Gable scurry away, her face a knot of confusion and pity. I watched a landscaping truck rattle by. Then I saw it. It turned the corner, slow and silent. It wasn't the white, nondescript sedan I imagined Silver Pines would send. It wasn't a taxi. It was a van. But it was the kind of van I'd only ever seen in magazines. A brand new Mercedes Sprinter, the long wheelbase model, painted a deep, metallic black. It was so clean it looked wet, and it moved with a silent electric hum. It didn't rattle. It glided. It pulled up to the curb, stopping directly in front of me with a soft, pneumatic shush. The side door was a solid panel of tinted glass. I heard the sound of the window sliding open above me. Chloe's voice, no longer in her vlogger cadence, cut through the air, sharp and confused. What? What is this? Ben, did you call a car service? Ben mumbled something I couldn't hear. The van's side door slid open with a whisper. A woman stepped out. She wasn't in scrubs, and she wasn't a driver. She was in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, and she was wearing a dark, perfectly tailored pantsuit and expensive-looking loafers. She was the kind of woman Chloe was desperately trying to imitate. She looked at me, at my carry-on, and at the blue plaid cooler bag. Then she smiled, a real smile, a smile of respect. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked, her voice crisp and professional. "I am," I said. From the window, I heard a sharp gasp from Chloe. The woman in the suit extended her hand. I took it. Her grip was firm. "I'm Sarah Chen," she said, "from Golden Harvest Distributors. I'm so glad we're finally doing this." I heard the thud of something hitting the floor in the apartment above. Sarah turned to the van. On the black panel, in elegant, swirling gold script, were words that I already knew, but that Ben and Chloe were seeing for the first time. Maggie's Hearth. Artisan bakers. "Ben, what is that?" Chloe shrieked. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was a raw, ugly sound. "What is Maggie's Hearth?" I picked up my black carry-on. Sarah immediately moved to the blue plaid cooler. She didn't grab it. She treated it with a gentle, profound care, as if it were a donor organ. "Let me get that for you, Mrs. Miller," she said, lifting it with both hands. "We've prepped the new proofer to your exact specifications. The mother will have a home the second we arrive." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "The contract is all signed," she said, loud enough for the open window above to hear. "The partners are thrilled. They can't wait to get your bread into the new line. That first advance is already in your account, by the way." "What? What account?" Ben's voice. He was at the window now, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen before. "Mom? What? What contract?" I looked up at him. I looked at my son, the boy who couldn't even look at me 10 minutes ago. And I looked at Chloe, who was standing beside him, her phone hanging uselessly at her side, her mouth open, her mask of fake pity shattered, revealing the raw, uncomprehending greed and fury beneath. I gave them nothing, no wave, no bitter, final word. I simply turned away from them, got into the van, and sat down on a plush leather seat. The inside smelled like a new car and, faintly, of fresh milled flour. Sarah placed the cooler with Frankie into a specially designed, temperature-controlled slot. She buckled it in. Then she smiled at me. "Ready to get to work, Mrs. Miller?" "I am," I said. The door slid shut, cutting off the sound of Chloe screaming my name. The van pulled away from the curb, silent as a shadow, leaving them standing at the window, watching their entire future drive away. As the van turned the corner, the bakery, my bakery, Frank's bakery disappeared from view. I didn't look back. Ben and Chloe were probably still at that window, their minds scrambling, trying to understand what just happened. They thought it was a miracle, a coincidence, that some rich savior just happened to pull up at the exact moment of my deepest humiliation. They're so young, they don't believe in hard work, so they have to believe in magic. But this wasn't magic, it wasn't luck, it was a contingency. And it all started 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, with a man named Arthur Petrov. If you know anything about bread, I mean real bread, you know that name. He's a critic from New York. He doesn't just review food, he sentences it. He's old school, wears tweed jackets, and he knew Frank. They'd argued about fermentation times at a food conference back in '98. Frank respected him, which was more than he could say for most people. Petrov hadn't been in our town in 20 years, but he was here now, sitting at the only occupied table in the sterile, white-walled bakery. Chloe was practically vibrating. She'd leaked his arrival to her vlog followers, and she was filming him from a discreet angle. "This is it, Ben," I heard her whisper hiss from the counter. "If he loves the new direction, we're made." Ben, sweating in his crisp blue shirt, walked out holding a wooden board. On it was their new creation, the 90-minute bread from the high-speed proofer. It was perfectly round, perfectly pale, and utterly lifeless. "Mr. Petrov," Ben said, his voice a little too loud. "We're so honored. We want you to be the first to try the future of the Miller's Loaf. It's our new quick rise. It's scalable, efficient, and has a 99% consistency rate." Petrov just looked at the bread. He didn't touch it. "Scalable," he said, his voice a low rumble. "What a fascinating adjective for a loaf of bread." "It's about the brand, sir," Chloe chimed in, stepping forward. "We're moving into the national space." "The national space," Petrov repeated. He picked up a slice, tore it. It ripped with a soft, weak sound, like cotton batting. He held it to his nose, sniffed, and his upper lip curled, just slightly. Then he ate it. He chewed twice. He didn't spit it out. He didn't grimace. He did something much worse. He just stopped. He stopped chewing, placed the half-eaten piece of bread back on the board, and wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice flat. "In 1998, your father and I almost came to blows over his use of a high-protein winter wheat. He was a stubborn, brilliant, infuriating man, and he made the best damn bread in this state." He pushed the board away. This is an insult. This isn't bread. This is foam. This is Wonder Bread that went to college. It's soulless." Chloe's face went white. Ben started to stammer. But the market, the metrics. "The market." Petrov looked around the empty, sterile room. "What market? The one that used to line up out your door? Where are they, son?" He was about to get up, and then he saw me. I was in the back, by the dish sink, trying to be invisible. I was just scrubbing a bowl, my old, off-brand apron on. His eyes narrowed. He stood up and walked right over to me, past a horrified Ben and Chloe. "Maggie," he said, his voice suddenly soft. "My God, it is you. I thought you'd be. Well, you're still here. What are you?" He looked at my hands in the soapy water. "I'm just helping out, Arthur," I said quietly. He looked at me, then at Ben, then at the sad, pale loaf on the board, and he understood everything. "Ah," he said, "I see." He looked back at Ben. "You, sir, are a fool. You have her here, a master, and you're serving that? You're not just failing your business. You're betraying your father's name." He threw his napkin on the table and walked out. The door, the one without a bell, clicked shut behind him. Chloe's face was a mask of pure reptilian fury. Ben just stood there, his hands shaking. And all that rage, that humiliation, they didn't point it at themselves. They pointed it at me. "You embarrassed me," Ben yelled, after a second of silence. "You and your old ways. He saw you. You made us look like a joke." That was the night I packed my bag. But I did one more thing. After they'd gone, after the bakery was dark, I went up to my apartment. I pulled out my secret hidden jar of Frankie. I fed it. And then, using my tiny, unreliable apartment oven, I baked one. Perfect. One 8-hour ferment loaf. The crust was a deep, dark mahogany, almost black in places. The crumb was so open you could see the light through it. The smell. It was the smell of my life. I let it cool. I wrapped it in simple brown parchment paper, tied it with twine. I found out Petrov was staying at the Old Town Inn. I walked there, in the dark, and left the loaf at the front desk. The note just said, "This is Frank's bread." At 11 p.m., my phone rang. It was Petrov. His voice was thick. "Maggie, where did you? How?" "I keep a little. Just for myself." "In my apartment," I said. There was a long silence on the line. I heard him take a breath. "I'm holding it right now. I'm eating it. Maggie, it's a masterpiece. It's better than I remembered." He paused. "He's destroying it all, isn't he? The boy, he's throwing it all away for her." "Yes," I said. "Are you going to let him?" That was the question. I looked at my small packed carry-on bag sitting by the door. "No," I said. "I'm not." "Good." Petrov's voice was suddenly sharp. "All business. Because the world needs this bread. Your son is a fool, but you're not. I know some people. They run a private distributor, Golden Harvest. High-end. They supply Whole Foods, Erewhon. All the places where people pay $20 for a loaf of real bread. They are sick of frauds. They're looking for an authentic story. And my God, do you have one?" He made the call. The next 2 weeks, while I was being called slow and off-brand, I was on my old laptop. I was in secret video calls with Sarah Chen from Golden Harvest. I was signing digital contracts. I was opening a new private bank account. Sarah. She didn't see an old woman. She saw a legacy founder. She didn't see an old recipe. She saw a heritage brand. The story of my son's betrayal. Of Chloe's arrogance. That wasn't a liability, it was marketing. It was the brand. "The mother starter, hidden away," she'd said, her eyes gleaming. "Maggie, it's incredible. It's the founder meets chef's table. We're not just selling bread. We're selling your vindication." They leased a state-of-the-art kitchen in a new artisan co-op, 20 miles away. They fronted me the first-year operating costs. They sent an advance. And they arranged the pickup. Thursday, 9:15 a.m. So as I sat in that warm, silent van, watching the town roll by, I just smiled. Chloe and Ben, in their arrogance, thought they were throwing me to the wolves. They thought they were sending me to Silver Pines. They had no idea that they were just the final ugly step in my business plan. I didn't need a rescue. I just needed them to be exactly who they were, one last time, to push me out the door. The van was so quiet. All I could hear was the smooth, low hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. I watched the familiar streets of my town slide by, but they looked different now, like I was seeing them from behind a camera. Sarah, sitting across from me, checked her watch. 9:17, she said, almost to herself. Right on cue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. "And there it is," she said, a small professional smile on her face. "A text from the courier. Package delivered." I smiled back. "Package delivered," I repeated. I liked the sound of that. I looked out the window as we passed the town hall, but I wasn't seeing it. I was seeing the scene I had so carefully arranged, happening right now, back at the bakery. Chloe would be at the window, her face pale, her mind still trying to process the name Maggie's Hearth. Ben would be standing beside her, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. And then the doorbell would ring. Not the tacky jingle bell Frank and I had loved, but the new, jarring, 3-tone BEE bong she'd had installed last week. Ben would go, I was sure. He'd stumble down the stairs, probably hoping it was a mistake, that the black van was coming back. But on the doorstep, it wouldn't be me. It would be a young man in a crisp uniform, holding a large, stiff, waterproof envelope and a digital clipboard. "Mr. Benjamin Miller." "Yes." "You've been served." The man would hand him the envelope and watch as Ben fumbled with the stylus to sign. Chloe would be right behind him. "What is that? What now?" "Another bill." She'd snatch it from his shaking hands. She'd rip open the cardboard tab, her nails tearing the thick paper. She'd pull out the documents. The first thing she'd see would be the letterhead from one of the biggest, most expensive law firms in the city. "What is this?" "Cease and desist," she'd say, her voice a confused, angry hiss. And then she'd read. Oh, I pictured her reading those words. I had gone over them with Sarah's lawyer 3 times, a sharp, kind man who specialized in heritage brands. He'd loved my story. I pictured her eyes, wide and unblinking, scanning the first paragraph. Pursuant to the original 1984 incorporation charter of the Miller's Loaf, LLC, co-signed by founders Frank Miller and Margaret Miller, Ben, with his business degree, had never bothered to read his father's founding documents, but I had. I spent the last 2 nights with a highlighter and a magnifying glass. I pictured Chloe's breath catching as she read Clause 4, Section B, the Key Person and Proprietary Products Clause, the one Frank's father, a suspicious old country baker himself, had insisted on. It stated that the business name, the Miller's Loaf, was legally and irrevocably tied to the proprietary methods and products developed by the founding artisans, namely, me and Frankie. The letter would spell it out in very simple, very expensive legal terms. The sourdough starter, known as the mother, or Frankie, is a unique proprietary biological asset, the sole and exclusive intellectual property of Margaret Miller. All recipes derived from said starter are derivative works and are also her property. As you are no longer in possession of or licensed to use these proprietary assets, you are in immediate breach of the founding charter. You are hereby ordered to cease and desist from all use of the Miller's Loaf name, brand, and associated goodwill and heritage. As you are no longer producing the Miller product. I could almost hear her voice, a high-pitched shriek. What does this mean, Ben? I looked at my reflection in the dark-tinted window of the van. It means, I whispered to myself, that the brand she was so obsessed with is gone. She thought the brand was the sterile white walls, the new logo she'd designed, the lifestyle she was selling on her vlog. She didn't get it. She never got it. The brand was me. The brand was 40 years of 4 a.m. mornings. It was the calluses on my hands. It was the slow 18-hour fermentation. It was the mother that I had kept alive through blizzards and power outages and grief. She hadn't just kicked me out. She'd legally evicted herself from her own inheritance. All she had now was an empty, sterile white box, a pile of debt, a 90-minute foam machine, and a foreclosure notice that was probably already in the mail. She couldn't call herself the Miller's Loaf. She couldn't even legally say she was associated with Frank's bread. She had taken a legacy, and in her blind, stupid arrogance, she had turned it into an empty room. The lawyer was very good, I said, my voice quiet in the warm van. Sarah nodded. He's the best. He said your case was, and I quote, a slam dunk. I settled back into the soft leather. I looked at the blue plaid cooler bag, buckled safely into the seat opposite me. For the first time in my adult life, I felt light. Well, Frankie, I said, patting the bag, it's just you and me now. Let's go get to work. So, I went to work. I really went to work. The Maggie's Hearth kitchen was beautiful. It was all new steel, yes, but it had heart. Sarah had found me a team of young bakers who were hungry to learn, not to scale, but to learn. They treated the mother starter like a religious artifact. They listened when I talked about humidity and fermentation and the feel of the dough. For the first time in years, I wasn't off-brand. I was the brand. And Ben and Chloe? Well, they went to work too. I got a text from Sarah about 2 weeks later. All it said was, "You might want to see this." It was a link to Chloe's vlog. I almost didn't click it. I was in my new, small, clean apartment, a place Golden Harvest had arranged for me. I was tired. My hands ached from kneading. The smell of our first test bake for Whole Foods was in the air. But my curiosity, it got the best of me. She'd kept filming. Of course she did. In Chloe's world, if you don't post it, it didn't happen. She'd rebranded. The shop was no longer the Miller's Loaf. A big vinyl banner hung over the door, covering the beautiful hand-carved sign Frank and I had put up. The new name was B&C Bakes. The logo was a sharp, sterile pastel blue. It looked like a logo for a dentist's office. The video was titled, Our Grand Reopening. New name, new look, new amazing product. It opened on her face, too close to the camera, her smile so wide it looked painful. "Hey guys," she chirped, "we are so excited to finally share the new direction. We've shed our old skin and are finally embracing our true, authentic brand." She panned the camera around. The shop was, just as I'd pictured, sterile and white, and empty. Utterly, completely empty. There wasn't a single customer. You could hear the hum of the new proofer and the buzz of the fluorescent lights. "We're showcasing our new signature loaf," she said, her voice strained. She held up one of the 90-minute travesties. It was pale. It was perfectly, unnaturally symmetrical. It looked like a beige brick of packing foam. It's all about consistency, guys. And the taste is just so light and modern. The bell, the BEE bong sound, went off. The door opened, and in walked Mrs. Gable, my 75-year-old pumpernickel customer, walking right into the lion's den. God bless her. Chloe's face lit up with a desperate, shark-like smile. "Carol! Oh, perfect! You're our first ever B&C customer. You have to try a sample of the new signature." She shoved a slice at her. The video zoomed in on Mrs. Gable's face as she took a tiny, suspicious nibble. She chewed. Once. Twice. Her face puckered. It was the exact face she'd make when she'd tell me the coffee was too bitter. "My goodness, dear," she said, her voice cracking through the silence. What on earth is this?" "It's our new quick-rise artisan," Chloe said, her smile twitching. "Artisan." Mrs. Gable looked at the slice in her hand like it was a dead mouse. "Child, this tastes like cardboard. It's like that Wonder Bread, but sadder. It's all air. Where's the real bread? Where's Maggie's bread?" Chloe's smile didn't just freeze, it shattered. The video abruptly cut a fast, jerky edit. When it came back, Chloe was sitting in her car, her eyes red, the fake crying face I remembered from my eviction day. "It's just so hard when people don't understand your vision," she sniffled. But she'd made a mistake. She'd forgotten to turn off the comments. And the comments, they were a thing of beauty. They weren't just from her followers anymore. They were from my customers, the people of my town. "I went in yesterday. B&C Bakes. More like B and S. This is a disgrace to Frank's memory. This bread is trash. Tastes like a sponge that was left in the sink. I want my money back. Fraud. What did you do to Maggie? We all saw her get in that black van. Maggie's hearth bread is already at the farmer's market and it's incredible. Good for her. You stole a 40-year-old business, kicked out the founder, and destroyed it in 2 weeks. Hope the brand was worth it. This tastes like Wonder Bread with an ego." My personal favorite was just cardboard. Carol was right. I closed the laptop. I looked down at my own hands, caked in white and rye flour. Maggie's Hearth had just filled its first order for 50 loaves, to be delivered to the biggest specialty grocer in the state. Chloe, in her arrogance, thought the business was a logo. She thought it was a lifestyle. She thought she could just throw away the off-brand old woman and keep the goodwill. She forgot the one, simple, unscalable truth. The business was the bread. And she had just thrown away the baker. You can't just throw away the baker and expect the bread to stay. A business built on a lie. It doesn't just fail. It rots from the inside out. I didn't see the final collapse, but in a small town you don't need to. You hear it. The whispers travel faster than any vlog. Maggie's Hearth was a runaway success. We'd been featured in Food and Wine magazine. The story of the hidden mother starter was everywhere. We were getting orders from high-end grocers in New York, in Chicago. I had to hire 4 more bakers just to keep up. I was happy. I was tired in the way you're tired after a good day's work, not the soul-crushing exhaustion I'd felt for years. And then I got a call from Mrs. Gable. She sounded sad. "Oh, Maggie," she said, her voice thin. "It's over. They're gone." I didn't have to ask who they were. She told me. She'd walked by the old bakery a few nights earlier, well after dark. The big B&C Bakes banner, the one Chloe had been so proud of, was peeling. One of the grommets had ripped, and the cheap vinyl was flapping in the wind, making a thwack, thwack, thwack sound against the brick. All the lights were off, but the front door was unlocked. She'd peered in. And she saw him. Ben. He was just sitting in the middle of the dark, sterile, empty room, The stainless steel tables were gone. The big humming refrigerator was gone. The 90-minute high-speed proofer, their glorious foam-making machine, had been repossessed by the leasing company. He was sitting on an overturned pickle bucket, one of the old ones I used to use for brine. He was holding a single piece of paper in his hands. It wasn't a new business plan. It wasn't a letter from Chloe. It was a final notice of foreclosure from the bank. The building. The building Frank and I had poured our lives into. The building we had paid off in 1999 with a mix of cash and checks. Ben had taken out a second, and then a third, mortgage on it. To pay for the rebranding, to pay for Chloe's new car, to pay for the loan he never got. And now the bank was taking it. It was all gone. Mrs. Gable said he didn't even look up. He just sat there in the dark. And the worst part? He was alone. He'd lost his mother. He'd lost his business. And when the money finally officially ran out, he lost his wife. He'd apparently gone upstairs, to my old apartment, the one he and Chloe had taken over. He'd walked up those creaking stairs, probably looking for her. Looking for, I don't know, an ally? An explanation? But the apartment was empty, colder and more sterile than he could ever have imagined. She hadn't just packed a bag, she had gutted the place. The new $1,000 white sofa was gone, the 80-inch flat-screen TV was gone, the fancy espresso machine that cost more than my first oven, gone. Her closet? Wiped clean. Not even a stray hanger. His closet, he found, was full. His old t-shirts, his jeans, the blue button-down shirt she'd made him wear, all still there. She hadn't left him. She'd liquidated her assets, and she'd left a note. Not on the kitchen counter, not on the pillow. She'd dropped it on the floor, by the door, like a piece of trash. A single sheet of her expensive, cream-colored personal stationery. Ben picked it up, his hands shaking. It didn't say, "I'm sorry, Ben." It didn't say, "I'll miss you," or "This was a mistake." It said, "I can't be tied to a failure, Ben. It's bad for my brand." That was it. He was alone, in an empty, foreclosed building, with a note that told him he was no longer on brand. He had sacrificed his mother, his father's legacy, and his home, all for a woman who left him the second the money was gone and the lifestyle was over. When Mrs. Gable finished telling me, I thanked her. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt a deep, heavy, inevitable sadness. I felt the crushing gravity of it all. I went into my new kitchen. I opened the temperature-controlled proofer, and I looked at Frankie. It was bubbling, alive, strong. Frank's voice was clear as a bell in my ear. "You can't build a house on a weak foundation, Maggie." Ben's foundation wasn't the bakery. It was his character. And it was just rotten. He hadn't just lost his business. He'd lost everything. Months passed. Winter came, hard and fast, blanketing the town in a deep, unforgiving white. The new Maggie's Hearth kitchen was a beacon of warmth. The air inside was always steamy, sweet with baking bread, sharp with cinnamon. We were running 3 shifts. The big delivery vans, the black ones with the gold logo, were coming and going all day, taking our bread to places I'd only ever read about in magazines. I was finishing a shift, my apron covered in rye flour, my arms aching in that good, familiar way. It was dark, maybe 7 p.m., and the snow was coming down in thick, wet flakes. One of my young bakers, a kid named Leo, stopped by the back door, the one we used for deliveries. He peered out the small, wired glass window. "Hey, Maggie," he called out. There's a homeless guy out here. He's just standing by the steam vent." My heart, which I thought had become so tough, gave a stupid, painful lurch. Just standing there," I asked. "Yeah, he's not really asking for anything, just watching. He looks bad, Maggie. He's shaking. It's gotta be 20 degrees out there." I sighed. "All right, I'm coming. Grab one of the day-olds from the charity box, will you?" I walked to the back, untying my apron. I braced myself. We got people like this sometimes, especially in the cold. You do what you can. You give them bread. I pulled open the heavy steel door. The cold hit me like a slap. A cloud of steam from the ovens billowed out around me, and in that steam, a figure was standing. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Ben. No, it was the ghost of Ben. The last time I'd seen him, he was a little soft, a little overfed, wearing a crisp blue shirt. This was a different person. He was thin, skeletal. His face was hollow, covered in a patchy, dirty beard. His eyes were sunken, red-rimmed, and looked old. He was wearing a thin, torn hoodie, the one I'd bought him for college, caked with dirt. He was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable shiver that rattled his whole body. He was staring at me, his eyes wide, like a man seeing an angel, or a demon. "Mom," he whispered. His voice was a dry, broken rasp. I froze. My hand was still on the door. The warmth from the bakery was rushing out, the steam wrapping around him, and the cold was rushing in, chilling my face and my hands. Every instinct in my body, the mother instinct, screamed, "Pull him inside, wrap him in a blanket, give him soup." But the other part of me, the part that had stood on the curb while he filmed me, the part that had read the cease and desist and signed the contracts, that part held me still. "Ben," I said. My voice was flat. I didn't recognize it. He took a shuffling step forward. "Mom," he broke. A raw, animal sob tore out of him, and he hunched over, his hands on his knees. He started to cry, but they were the dry, gasping sobs of someone who's been cold and hungry for a very long time. I'm so sorry," he choked, wiping his nose on the sleeve of his hoodie. I didn't. I just waited." The silence stretched out, punctuated only by his awful, broken sounds. "I lost it," he whispered, looking up, his eyes pleading. "Everything. The bank. The bank took the building. Chloe. She's gone. She's in California. I've been sleeping at the shelter." He gestured vaguely down the street. "I saw the vans," he said, his voice desperate. I knew it was you. I just..." He looked at the bakery behind me, at the golden light spilling out into the alley. He sniffed the air, and his whole body seemed to relax. I just wanted to smell it," he whispered. "One more time. I miss. It's the only..." He couldn't finish. He just looked at me, a 5-year-old man who looked 60, a complete and total failure, broken by his own weakness. My heart was a cold, hard knot. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry with him. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. I turned my back on him. I left him standing in the snow, in the cold, and I walked back into the warmth. I heard him make a small, hopeless sound behind me. I walked past Leo, who was holding a day-old loaf in a plastic bag. I didn't take it. I walked to the big steel cooling racks, the ones stacked high with the bread going out to New York. I took the most beautiful loaf there, a big, dark-crusted, 18-hour sourdough. It was still warm from the oven. The steam was still rising from it. It smelled of life. It smelled of Frank. It was the best thing I knew how to make. I walked back to the open door. He was still there, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. He hadn't moved. He looked up as I approached, his eyes full of a desperate, terrified hope. I held out the loaf. His hands, black with grime, reached for it, as if he was afraid I'd pull it away. He took it. He held it to his chest, like a man holding a child, and just buried his face in the crust, breathing it in. "Thank you," he sobbed. "Mom, thank you. Can I come in?" I looked at him. At my son. My blood. The boy I had raised. The man who had betrayed me. "No," I said. His head snapped up, his eyes full of tears widened in shock. "You need to build your own life, Ben," I said, my voice as cold as the air around us. "From scratch." I pulled the heavy steel door. It closed with a final metallic thud, shutting out the cold, and the snow, and the sound of my son, weeping alone in the dark. I leaned against the door, my eyes closed, the hot, fresh smell of the bakery filling my lungs. I had given him bread. I had given him the lesson. The rest was up to him. I leaned against the heavy steel door, my eyes closed. I could feel the cold radiating through the metal, a sharp contrast to the humid warmth of the bakery at my back. I didn't hear any more footsteps, just the whistle of the wind in the alley and the muffled thud, thud, thud of the big mixers inside. The rest was up to him. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of caramelized sugar, toasted rye, and life. I turned around and walked away from the door, back into the golden light. I walked over to the main proofing cabinet, the new, state-of-the-art, one that Sarah had insisted on. I opened it, and there it was. Frankie, my mother. It wasn't in a small mason jar anymore. It lived in a big, temperature-controlled steel tub, bubbling with a slow, powerful energy. It was the living, breathing heart of this entire place. I scooped a measure of fresh stone-ground flour and added it, stirring with a long wooden spoon. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was a prayer. They thought I was old. They thought I was slow. They thought I was off-brand. They thought I was the thing to be thrown away so their new, fast, empty lives could begin. But in life, you have to be careful what you throw away. Sometimes, the thing you think is old and in the way is the mother. It's the one thing holding it all together. So let me ask you, did I do the right thing? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest of times.